Okay, let's dig into this. We've got these sources you sent over, looking at something, well, a lot of us deal with, right? Health stuff like diabetes,
Mhm.
obesity, and your sources, they make this really striking point right away, these conditions. Usually not something you're born with. They, develop.
Yeah, and what really jumps out from the material is just the scale they're talking about. The numbers are pretty significant.
Totally. Look at these stats they pull out. In 2021, 38.4 million Americans had diabetes.
Wow.
That's what, 11.6% of the population? And it's not slowing down either. They mentioned about 1.2 million new diagnoses every year.
And the total number just keeps climbing year on year.
Exactly. And the sources also connect this to the rise in obesity, especially concerning among younger adults.
Right. They flagged that jump between 2009 and 2020. What was it? 33%
Yep.
up to 41% obesity in young adults in the US. That's a big leap.
It really is. So, our mission here with this deep dive is to unpack how these sources connect our diet, specifically starch and carbs, to these health issues, using concepts like the glycemic index.
And the core argument seems to be that maybe the fundamental cause, which they frame as excessive starch and carbs, isn't getting enough attention, even though everyone agrees diet matters.
Yeah, like the sources are saying, hey, look closer at what's actually on the plate.
Precisely. A key part of the puzzle might be overlooked.
So, to get why they focus so much on starch and carbs, we need to understand this mechanism they talk about, the glycemic index, GI, and how it links to insulin.
Right, so the sources explain GI basically as a score, yeah?
Yeah.
How fast a food makes your blood sugar go up after you eat it. High GI means a quick spike.
Okay, and here's the connection the sources make. They argue these constant spikes from eating high GI foods often lead to this state of high blood sugar.
Mhm.
And that, they say, is a big driver behind things like obesity, and it contributes to other diseases down the line.
Yeah, it's not just the spike itself. The sources also explain how eating a lot of starchy food can cause insulin resistance.
Ah, okay. Explain that a bit.
Well, insulin resistance is basically when your body's cells don't respond well to insulin anymore. And you need insulin to move glucose, sugar, from your blood into your cells for energy.
So if the cells are resistant, the sugar just hangs around in the blood longer.
Exactly. Leads to that prolonged high blood sugar the sources mentioned.
Right.
But interestingly, they do make a distinction. Not all starch is bad, apparently.
Oh,
No, they bring up research on resistant starch, suggesting that getting, say, 15 to 60 grams of that type daily might actually help. Could lower insulin after meals, maybe even improve sensitivity over time.
huh. So the type of carb really matters, according to this material.
Very much so, based on what's presented here.
Okay, so the mechanism is high GI foods spike blood sugar, potentially leading to insulin resistance, keeping blood sugar high. So where do your sources say we're actually getting most of these high GI starchy foods?
Well, they really zero in on eating out,
Right.
restaurants, fast food. They argue these ingredients are often kind of hidden or just everywhere. Like, think about salad dressings. Many have added sugar or corn syrup.
So you think you're eating healthy, but bam, hidden sugar.
Right. And then there's refined flour. Your sources point out how common it is in coatings for fried stuff. Fried chicken, fried fish.
Ah, the breading. Adds starch right there.
Yep. They specifically mention wheat flour as being common for that, contributing a lot to the GI load of the meal, even before sides.
Okay, let's look at how the sources break down meals. They start with breakfast, often seen as the healthy meal, right? But they argue, nope, often full of high GI stuff.
Yeah, they point straight at things like pancakes, biscuits, French toast, waffles.
The classic.
Exactly. And usually made with white flour, which digests really fast into sugar.
And you don't eat those plains, usually. You've got syrup, corn syrup, maple syrup,
Hmm.
also high GI.
Multiplying the effect, yeah. And then the sources list other things too, like white bread for toast, lots of processed cereals.
Common breakfast items.
Very. And even some less obvious ones, like gravy, often thickened with uncooked white flour.
Right.
And they even mention mozzarella sticks if those pop up on a breakfast menu
Yeah.
somewhere. White flour, fried cheese, more starch.
Okay, moving on to dinner. The sources say starch and high GI foods are lurking there too, sometimes unexpectedly.
Like salads again. At restaurants, they might have lots of starch from croutons, those sugary dressings we talked about, maybe other add-ins.
And the fried stuff comes back?
Yep. Fried fish, fried chicken, often coated in that white flour. And then, of course, the sides.
Ah, the sides.
Bread,
Potatoes,
definitely.
French fries, major sources they highlight. Gravy again, maybe over steak. Toasted white bread on the side.
It adds up quickly.
It does. And here's something interesting your sources mention.
Yeah.
Even vegetables, if they're overcooked,
Yeah.
their GI can go up. Apparently, overcooking breaks down fiber and changes the structure, making the carbs absorb faster.
Wow, okay. That's subtle.
And other common high GI sides they list, rice, corn, potatoes again. They specifically call out white rice. Why white rice?
High starch, high glucose load. They cite its GI as being pretty high, like 73 to 82.
Okay, so that brings us to fast food, which the sources seem to see as like ground zero for all this.
Yeah, they describe fast food menus as just dominated by these items. Sandwiches on white buns, fries, pancakes, French toast, onion rings, cakes, pies.
All the usual suspects, mostly refined carbs and sugar.
Right. And the impact, they argue, is clear. Things like fries, pastries known to cause big blood sugar spikes, high GI.
But they do mention fast food places have healthier base ingredients sometimes,
They
right?
do. Like, meat itself has no GI. Vegetables, eggs, avocados are low GI or can even lower blood sugar.
Yeah.
But the sources point out these healthier things often get paired with the unhealthy stuff.
Like breading on the chicken or sugar in the sauce or served with fries.
Exactly. It's the combination. And the sources kind of wonder why this happens so much.
Yeah.
Is it just about profit? Or maybe ignorance of the health impact? Or just not caring about customer health? They don't really answer, just raise the question.
But they do link frequent fast food to outcomes, right?
Oh, yeah. Weight gain, insulin resistance, higher triglycerides. They also kind of dismiss the zero-calorie sodas.
How so?
They argue it misses the point. Lacks nutrition, doesn't solve what they call the underlying carbohydrate poisoning epidemic.
Strong words.
They also make a pretty direct observation about, seeing the health consequences like obesity among people who eat there often.
So after laying all this out, the sources start asking some bigger questions, right? About what should happen next.
They float the idea of laws or regulations. Like, should fast food chains be forced to put glycemic index info right there on the menu?
Make it obvious to consumers.
Yeah. And should they maybe be required to offer genuinely non-diabetic meal options, not just slightly tweaked versions of the high-starch stuff?
And they mentioned the current FDA rule only requires calorie counts and stuff if you ask for it at bigger chains, but not GI specifically on the menu.
Correct. So it's not front and center information right now. It raises the question of responsibility for sharing that health info.
And they also bring up the media. Like, would it take media focusing on the health problems of customers to actually push the industry to change?
Right. Could public awareness and pressure do what regulations or maybe industry self-interest hasn't managed to do so far?
So wrapping this up, based on the material you shared, we've seen the stats on diabetes and obesity, how your sources connect them to GI and insulin resistance.
And critically, how they argue starch and high GI carbs are just so widespread, especially when eating out in restaurants and fast food, often hidden.
Understanding those specifics from your source material really highlights the challenge they're describing.
Absolutely. It paints a specific picture based on their analysis.
Yeah, and it definitely leaves you thinking, doesn't it? I mean, if high GI, starchy foods are so common where we eat out, as these sources argue, and we see the health stats rising, where does the responsibility lie? How much is on the food industry versus us as individuals?
And what role should rules or maybe media attention play in all this? In just informing people or maybe actively shaping the food environment?
Lots to chew on there. Definitely something for you, the listener, to consider as you navigate your own food choices.